Competition is fierce in the used car arena, so how can you ensure that your pre-owned inventory stands above the rest? Success starts with the quality of your leads. Auto Trader for Independents offers products that help drive high-quality leads for independent dealers like you.
Welcome to Used Car News Podcast. Used Car News is your top source for fast and reliable news that car dealers can rely on for this evolving industry. Here are this month's top stories. Skoda sides with CFPB. Asbury Automotive increases stock repurchase authorization. Auctions balance digital evolution with dealers' needs. Plus special guest Tom Kondrat, the global lead of advanced analytics from Urban Science.
Hello, everyone. This is Jeff Ballant, managing editor of Used Car News, and this is the Used Car News Podcast. I hope you're doing well. This month, we've got another excellent guest. This is Tom Kondrat, global lead of advanced analytics for Urban Science, based right here in the Motor City. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing well, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Tom and his colleague, Simon Bradley, did a presentation at downtown at the Renaissance last week from the time of this recording, early May. And they discussed some really great information they had doing some analytics about both dealer stuff and on EVs. And Tom's expertise or Tom's focus was on the EVs. So we're going to start right there. Tom, what was the purpose of this specific study? Urban Science has a lot of great data. We've used it before. What was the purpose of this EV? What were you guys looking for?
Thanks, Jeff. So the main purpose of the release of the micro study was to talk about retail trends with electric vehicles. There's been nothing in my career thus far that's been more interesting to more people than the electric vehicle transition that we're in. So it's just a very interesting topic. And what Urban Science brings to the table is daily retail data, particularly in the new car business, but also in used with CPO to some degree. Okay. And we were just kind of talking to media and the automotive analysts about just trends with EVs and trends with dealerships overall.
Yeah, this was a meeting with the Automotive Press Association and the Society of Automotive Analysts. So we had a lot of real good questions during that time, probably more than you guys can answer. So that was really good. So for the EVs, what were some of the things, the high points that you saw regarding EVs, growth, dealerships, and some of the generational stuff you guys did?
So last year, the story, the way I saw it, is 50% growth in the battery electric market last year. Wow. Tesla was up significantly, but the other story was all non-Tesla brands were up over 80% last year in battery electric growth. So it was a gangbusters year for battery electrics. It was over 1 million battery electrics sold. And that was a really interesting story as that progressed. Hybrids were also up too. Hybrids were up, over 50% as well. Now, what's interesting to start this year is that battery electrics only were up 3% through April 30th, only up 3% from a retail sales standpoint. And that was something that I think caught our attention, and we wanted to talk about that. And so we can get into some of those details. But to me, that was kind of the headliner, is that while hybrids are remaining strong, up, combined battery hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and just regular gas electrics, no plug-ins, they're up over 33% this year. So that's kind of the story in the national level. And we can talk about some more details with that if you'd like.
What did that tell you? I mean, I don't know if you guys dig that deep in terms of what dealers think or what you guys think, why that is. It has to do with cost? It has to do with charging stuff? I know you talked a little bit about that. Is there a way that you can understand why the growth wasn't as big, or is it the economy? I don't know. Interest rate.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think you had the IRS rule changes January 1st, took many models off of the list for, rebates, even including some Model 3s, which, high volume vehicle historically for Tesla. So Model 3 sales are way, way down this year. So that's part of it, the IRS rule changes. The other thing that I think is interesting is the charging network. And with, Tesla's network being an exclusive, brand only charging network, which was really a premium feature for the brand. Starting around May of last year, Ford and then General Motors announced that they're going to be connecting with that. So their vehicles can use an adapter to connect with that, but they're not made for that yet. Right. And those products will be changing in the future. I think with the 2025 model year, they will start offering the NACS Tesla charging standard integrated into those vehicles. So I think in the consumer's minds, there's a lot of, uncertainty and a lot of dynamic things happening with the charging network. So that's part of it too. Last but not least, there's just a lot of legacy brands are offering, new battery electric entrants into the market. And so consumers are trying to figure out, the brands that they like, what are they offering, what's coming out. So just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of dynamic forces in the retail market overall.
Yeah, one of the interesting, because it was 1.1 million EVs in 2023. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. And then if you include the others, the hybrids and the plugins, and then it's 2.6 million. Was that right?
That's correct.
Okay. One of the interesting stats I saw, and I wasn't clear to understand. I meant to ask you at the event, and I didn't. When it said, you had a stat in there that said 2 out of 3 dealers saw an increase in sales and revenue of EVs. So obviously, I'm thinking that those are obviously franchise dealers. When I see 2 or 3, is everybody selling EVs? I mean, all the franchises, I assume probably they all dabble, but that seems like a big figure.
It is. It's not every franchise offers it. And, I think if you talk to some dealers, let me take a step back.
Sure.
This is really a geographic story.
Okay? Yeah.
That's what makes this partly what makes it so interesting is, obviously California. California is 33% of all battery electric sales across the country.
33%. Wow.
33%, right? That's been declining, but it's at 33% right now. If you go to places like, the Washington, D.C. metro area, you've got pretty high BEV sales there. You go to places like Seattle or Portland, right? But you go to the Midwest, the upper Midwest, the Great Plains, lots of places in the South, it's a different story. You could have 2% share, 5% share in a lot of places. So depending on which dealers you talk to, you'll get a very different perception of the demand for EVs and, the profit, the profit potential.
Oh, yeah.
EVs, right? So yeah, the survey data at the national level is one thing, but I think it's the perspective really changes based on where you live.
Well, let's get into that, because I thought this is going to be tough because this is audio, and you had some great maps and stuff. We'll definitely follow up online in our print edition with following up on this, because it was really good. And you were kind of overlaying a map of what EV market looks like across the United States and what EV or plugins and hybrids do. And they were like 2 different maps. Could you kind of describe that for us, just with with your voice as opposed to maps?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, think of metro areas with high income, households that have, congested traffic, and a lot of sectors that work in the, tech sectors or, technology, or working from home. That's places like Atlanta, Denver, Austin, Texas, Salt Lake City. You see these highly concentrated counties or zip codes that have 15 or 20% EV share. Wow. But they're pinpricks on the map.
Right.
And then you look at all these broad counties across the whole United States, and they're kind of shaded out, mm-hmm. because they have 3% share, 5% shares, very low share. Now, and then you look at the hybrid map, and the country is awash in the heat map color.
Yeah, yeah.
And, they represent lower volumes, but it's a night and day story, right? Battery electrics, highly concentrated metro areas, high wealth, high income, high tech sectors.
There you go.
And then the rest of the country is a different story. And partly what I a little bit jokingly talked about, but was really kind of serious, is sometimes, in the United States, in America, we like to pit, the Big Ten versus the SEC.
Right.
Or, Michigan versus Michigan State here in Detroit, right? It's all about like competition. And in some respects, it's hybrids are serving one kind of consumer.
Yeah.
And battery electrics are kind of serving another kind of consumer. And, over the long term, this is going to help with adoption because people will choose what's convenient for them and kind of dabble in electrification at their pace in ways that is convenient for them based on their lifestyle. No, and that's what the map represents to me, is it's different consumers with different lifestyles across the whole country. There is, broadly speaking, very large trends to electrification, but the story is different place to place.
Yeah, I think that's the story about this whole thing, is this kind of, they always talk about nudging, the government nudging in a direction where this is kind of a push and everybody's buying into it. And those maps show me that it's choice. If you give people choices, and the market's going to go where the market's going to go. Because like you said, I think there's going to be people are going to want the EVs. And then there's going to be people who don't, but they'll be good with the hybrids. And those maps are really interesting.
Competition is fierce in the used car arena, so how can you ensure that your pre-owned inventory stands above the rest? Success starts with the quality of your leads. Auto Trader for Independents offers products that help drive high-quality leads for independent dealers like you.
You had like kind of a top 5, bottom 5 states involving the where you saw EV growth and where you saw like not growth. Can you talk about those states?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and let me preface it to say, we've been looking at this in terms of adoption over time. So part of what we do at Urban Science, and I think this might be interesting to your OEM listeners and your dealer listeners, especially, dealer groups in particular, we forecast out the future automotive industry out to the year 2035 at a geographic level. So we're modeling this using, machine learning and AI techniques and, a lot of our data that we've got, consumer data. And so we're forecasting out how the industry will evolve over time. And so as part of that, we've got the top 5 metro areas that we think are, up and comers. And so it's largely speaking areas in the South or areas in the Southwest, with one exception. So it's places like Southern Florida. Mm-hmm. Southern Florida, the Raleigh-Durham technology triangle kind of area there. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix has been a big growth area for BEVs, but they're not quite at 15% yet. So they're going to get there soon, I think. And then it's Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is a little bit interesting because they're sandwiched in between 2 high growth markets of the Washington, D.C. market and New Jersey, which has very generous state incentives. So we think Philly will kind of just based on, geographic proximity, they'll adopt based on their markets that are hot markets next to them.
And you're seeing also like on the areas or the states where you're not going to see that EV growth or that you project.
Yes. So the places where we see like lower growth opportunity for battery electrics would be, places that are a little bit more, industrial kinds of sectors, places that have colder weather climates, generally speaking. So you get up into the northern colder climates, we see more adoption of hybrids, because then that range anxiety, weather related, especially range anxiety, kind of goes away with a hybrid vehicle. And so places like Minnesota, Illinois, New York, the Northeast, Massachusetts, Maine, a little bit more blend of both hybrids and battery electrics there.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. And it's funny, I live in a condo complex, and I want to ask you a little bit about that. We have like 7 units per building and about 10 buildings. I happen to be walking like right after your presentation, and one of my neighbors who I hadn't met before had a car plugged into his outside outlet. You have an outside outlet by the garage. So I went in and introduced myself, explained what I was asking about, and it was his brother's car. And his brother drove from Chicago. So, of course, he said the big problem he didn't like was 4-hour trip became 6 hours. And the same stuff that you reported on, either the chargers are hard to find, they're filled, or they're broken. And so that part I didn't like. Well, it was interesting that it was plugged into a regular outlet, and I didn't realize you could do that. And he said, yeah, it is, but he says it's brutally slow. So that, and he talked about the idea about, having to input new systems. Did you guys do any work on that? I didn't even ask about that in terms of the whole process of, is it going to be easier in the future to get EV electric systems in a house and how that'll affect the growth?
So one of the predictive variables that we do see limiting adoption is age of home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
So age of home is one. And then, of course, you mentioned multi-unit dwelling. So in the modeling that we do, especially like ages of homes, like let's say prior to 1960. So if you've got a lot of pre-1960s homes, you have older wiring, you've got, probably maybe fuse boxes or circuit breaker boxes that, they might only have 60 amp service on a 1965 home. And, to put a battery electric charging level 2 in, you need 60 amps right there for one of those.
Okay.
So that's a big part of our modeling. Part of what we do as Urban Science is that we help with planning of charging station demand. And so we try to match up consumers that might be very interested in a battery electric. However, they currently live in a condo complex, multi-unit situation, or have an older home. And it's either just not feasible, not practical, too expensive. So then what you need is convenient level 2, really convenient fast charging that's located close to that.
Yes.
And while this was not in our data, I think I cited it during the Q&A. Consumer Reports did a study. Only 1% of retail locations across the country have charging available. So in your neighbor's case, right, they might even have a visitor, but they might want to buy a battery electric, and they probably don't have charging at the, Meijers or the Walmarts or the restaurants that they go to, right? You go out to eat on, like we like to go out and eat on Friday nights as a family. It's kind of our habit, right? Well, you could go somewhere and plug it in and get your full charge if you don't have it at home while you wait, eat for an hour. That's all part of the infrastructure that in the survey data, we see consumers very concerned about the convenience of charging, for them. And we do see this as a limiting factor. So part of what's going to require for larger adoption growth is the convenience factor, right? Battery electrics, if we're going to adopt past the early adopter phase, the mainstream consumer needs convenience. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? You and I, we like convenience in our life, right? We adopt technology, whether it's an Apple Watch or a, mobile phone. It's all about convenience to us, And so the same is going to be true for battery electrics. It's got to be a convenient proposition for the mass market to adopt. And that's a concern right now, but it's improving.
And that's interesting because I thought to myself, if you're, there's so much promotion of EVs, people saying they want them. And I thought, what would it take for to me, I even think of something like a Starbucks or something. It's not a big thing, but it's like, you'd think that crowd would probably be an EV crowd. If you get certain these areas where they install that would definitely be attraction for, EV for customers who kind of cross those two markets.
Absolutely. In our DTI release and in our survey that we talked about, that we did with the Harris, we called it our Urban Science Harris Poll survey.
Right.
A fascinating little nugget in there is that as consumers adopt EV and they own them, they see the charging station, gas station option as more attractive. So what I mean by that is, most people assume I get an EV, I install a home charger, and yes, 80 to 90% of charging's in the home right now. But as they use them, they get what I coined this term, gas station envy. Because they're driving on their route and what? And I would love to just on my route as I'm driving home from work, as I'm driving here and there, I want a gas station option. And that's about a little over 20% of consumers that once they own an EV, it increases the desirability of just having a convenient charge, a 15-minute stop or something like that on their route would be very convenient for them. And there's very limited options. I mean, especially here in Southeast Michigan.
Yeah. We're not made for we're made for everybody to own their own cars and fill up with gas. Very good. Gosh, there's so much stuff we could talk about. But I did like the idea, even from we're used car news, so we look at used car dealers. But the idea of those stats you talked about, the markets in the states where EVs are big, is something for dealers to consider. I'm sure they do. If they do any market studies that, this would be a good option for us. I know we have a dealer in California. Very interesting. He was one of the first guys to start doing like EVs and stuff. And he's like, last time I talked to him last year at a dealer conference, he says, even in California, he sells all hybrids, plug-in hybrids or hybrids, because that's just where the market was at that time. So it is interesting. He's a little bit northern California, so maybe it's not the same market as some of the regular EVs, but it is interesting where you guys mapping this out, showing the demand and showing where it is. We know that it's going to be the market's going to help decide where people go. And then once that works out, I think the expansion of the EV market, and you talked about the decline of Tesla because of the other models, that will definitely push EVs, I would think. Like you said, I think it's probably people really not knowing where to start.
Yeah. So let me try to bring this into your used car following.
Sure. Great.
Used car listeners, right? The dealers and that kind of thing. Generation Z. So we everybody talks about Gen Z, millennials, and all of that. From a used car standpoint, I think there's a huge opportunity with the Gen Z market, because generally speaking, Gen Z are earlier in their careers. They have less disposable income, less, wealth and equity and all of that. As some of these used EVs come into the market, you have like a conflict, right? Where Generation Z loves EVs. They're very interested in it, but they can't afford them. But this is where the used car market can really help with increasing adoption. So we see that in the survey data. I mean, this is a huge number. Generation Z is willing to pay 47% premium to drive an EV. 47% premium.
I saw that because all buyers are like 28%. And I thought, the Generation Z, they're so aspirational.
They're aspirational, right? But that's where a used car option is really, the affordability makes it a reality, can make it a reality for them. And especially for better or for worse, because of this struggle with the EV market, those residuals, man, those things come really down after the new car. So they do become that the affordability option works both ways, because you do have a really dip in the residuals. And it would be good if you created that market, because then that would probably boost the new cars, I would think, like it always does. Well, in the way that I see the used car market for EVs, helping the transition long term is this way. It gets the new technology exposed to a whole new group of people, right? And so, if you get a really good deal on a used EV that's, low miles and all of that, and then you can install a charging station in your home, with the money that you've saved on an affordable used EV option, that charging station is there now perpetually.
Yes, very good.
And so it will help adoption long term as, these buyers, as they grow and all of that, they'll have that charging station already installed. I don't know how many of your listeners, are thinking about what the profit potential is, but when I was at NADA, I was really impressed with how progressively thinking the dealers were in terms of bundling charging services and charging installation with the vehicle purchase itself.
Nice.
And whether it was even just an electrician coming out and doing a survey to say, yeah, you can do it here, or just giving people that peace of mind, everything from that to just helping them understand, well, what charging options do you have in your neighborhood? Maybe showing them a map, like just that kind of education, like that can go a long way with just giving people a peace of mind, like an expert, right? The expert, car salesman who knows this business, that can help do the planning and do the research to give the peace of mind and the steps involved with the Generation Z. Also, we know they in the survey data, they want a good quality dealership experience.
Very good. Yeah, that was really good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually a good spot to wrap it up, talk about used cars and what dealers can look at and things. And I do like the idea of the charging at the dealership. A few years ago, I went to a meeting of Northwood University, a graduate there who was a Nissan dealer down here in the Detroit area. And their Nissan dealership, they had their plug-in stations right there in front. And I thought, you're exactly right. If they do that, then that is kind of like a little way to nudge and also a little way to provide that comfort and also an option for the customer.
Yeah, it's technology adoption is a social process. You have to get familiar with it from the people that the people in your social groups, but the dealership and the salesperson plays a key role in that, in educating people that want to be an early adopter. And so just want to encourage, dealers to realize that not everybody that walks into the store is going to be an EV shopper, right? It's a low percentage. It's 8%, 15%, but that's kind of normal and to be expected where we're at right now. And there's opportunity there for everybody.
Excellent. Well, that's great. This is a great spot. And folks, there's so much more information you can get if you look up Urban Science online. There's some great presentations. They did a whole other thing on dealer transformation, and you kind of touched on a lot of it. Dealer expectations, the buyer expectations, and really great information. And this has been a great presentation. Again, and the turnout at your event in Detroit there was fantastic. And as you knew, as Tom and people were there were more questions than they had time for. These guys just were eating it up. So again, this is I want to thank you to Tom Kondrat, again, global lead of advanced analytics for Urban Science. And look up their site, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Tom, thank you for spending time kind of crunching the numbers with us and showing us that the kind of the broader view of EVs and even a look into the future.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, have a great one.
Competition is fierce in the used car arena, so how can you ensure that your pre-owned inventory stands above the rest? Success starts with the quality of your leads. Auto Trader for Independents offers products that help drive high-quality leads for independent dealers like you.
The Supreme Court has overturned a 2022 Fifth Circuit decision upholding the funding mechanism for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Created under the Dodd-Frank Act in 2010, the CFPB is funded by the Federal Reserve, not Congress. Attorney Eric Johnson from Hudson Cook Law Firm noted that the 7-2 ruling was not expected based on oral arguments. He anticipates renewed CFPB enforcement actions and case activities now that funding uncertainties are resolved. Asbury Automotive Group, a leading U.S. automotive retail and service company, has increased its share repurchase plan to $400 million. President and CEO David Holt stated this move aligns with their disciplined capital allocation approach and confidence in their business strategy. So far in 2024, Asbury repurchased 281,000 shares for $59 million. The expanded program, now totaling $400 million, allows for flexible stock repurchases based on market conditions and strategic priorities. The wholesale auto industry is evolving with new tech tools to help dealers acquire, inspect, and sell vehicles. Innovations include MagNow's Live Lanes sale, Cox Automotive's Upside tool, and Open Lane's Visual Boost AI. Derek Hansen of Cox Automotive highlights how Upside guarantees sales and maximizes returns for dealers with high-mileage cars. MagNow's Live Lanes adds live auctioneers to boost sales, while Open Lane's AI tool enhances damage detection in vehicle inspections. These advancements offer dealers more efficient and profitable ways to manage their inventory and sales. Thanks for listening to Used Car News Podcast. Each month, we'll bring you fast and reliable news that car dealers can rely on for this evolving industry. For a free subscription of Used Car News, please go to usedcarnews.com. This podcast is a production of BG Ad Group. Make sure to share us on social media and like and follow wherever you get your podcasts.